Jeffrey Epstein. That's not a name that you've heard on this show very often, but newly uncovered emails reveal he wasn't just mingling with the wealthy and the social elite. It seems he fancied himself, or at least tried to portray himself, as a mover and shaker in foreign policy and diplomatic circles. Newly released emails show the dead predator talking about how he could offer insight into Donald Trump to Russian contacts. It's a strange twist in an already bizarre story, and we'll have the details. Now, admittedly, the Jeffrey Epstein saga is not something that we've covered to any degree here on the PDB. It's not that the story isn't important, but we tend to leave salacious stories to the tabloids while we focus on international stories and national security concerns. Epstein's criminal behavior and the extensive abuses he committed have been covered exhaustively elsewhere, and nothing about that really requires further embellishment from us. However, every once in a while, something new emerges that steps outside the realm of scandal and into the world that we do cover: national security, foreign influence, and the machinery of international diplomacy. And that's where today's story lands, because newly released emails are offering a surprisingly detailed look at Epstein's extensive network of foreign contacts, and they reveal that he wasn't just collecting names for cocktail party bragging rights. Epstein was actively trying to insert himself into high-level diplomatic conversations, including with Russian officials, by presenting himself as someone who could explain Donald Trump's worldview to foreign governments. And that angle, of course, caught the attention of our PDB staff. According to Politico's reporting on the emails, one of the most eyebrow-raising exchanges comes from June of 2018. Epstein wrote to former Norwegian Prime Minister Thorbjorn Jagland, say that 3 times fast, someone that he corresponded with regularly, claiming that he had previously spoken with Russia's late ambassador to the UN, Vitaly Churkin. Epstein said Churkin, quote, understood Trump after our conversations, and he claimed that Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, could likewise get insight into Trump's mind by talking to him, meaning Epstein. That email alone, well, tells us a lot. It shows that Epstein believed he had enough access or influence, or at least perceived proximity to Trump, that he could offer guidance to a foreign power on how to approach the U.S. president. He even framed Trump's mindset as simple to decode, suggesting foreign actors, quote, must be seen to get something when engaging with him. What's striking is the confidence with which Epstein wrote this. He wasn't tentative or speculative. He positioned himself as someone already playing this role, an informal advisor of sorts and a person whose insights supposedly mattered inside diplomatic circles. Now, there's no firm evidence that any such discussion with Lavrov ever happened, but the attempt itself is revealing. It shows that Epstein viewed himself not just as a wealthy financier with powerful friends, but as a behind-the-scenes broker, capable of influencing how world leaders interacted with the United States. And the Russian angle is just part of the story. The Miami Herald's review of the documents shows that Epstein's foreign contact network stretched far beyond Moscow. He maintained communication with Saudi and Emirati elites, prominent European political figures, American strategists like Steve Bannon, and business leaders on multiple continents. Some correspondents clearly saw him as a conduit for introductions or access, others as a man who was plugged into elite social circles. What the emails make clear is that Epstein treated influence as a kind of currency. Even after his 2008 conviction, long before his 2019 arrest, he was still working the phones, still sending invitations, still pitching ideas, still trying to broker meetings. He cultivated this shadow network of diplomats and financiers and politicians and academics and foreign officials as though he were running his own private foreign policy shop. And until now, much of that world remained opaque. These new emails, well, they don't rewrite global history. There's no evidence that Epstein shaped major policy decisions or altered diplomatic outcomes, at least not in this latest batch of emails that have been released. But they do show a man who believed that he had the ability to insert himself into geopolitical conversations and who tried to act on that belief more often than we had previously known, or at least he was trying to sell himself or portray himself as someone who was a mover and a shaker. They reveal how easily high-profile individuals can drift into quasi-diplomatic roles without oversight. They also show how the blurred lines between wealth and access and influence, especially in international politics, can create openings for people who have really no business being anywhere near these conversations. And for the U.S., which depends heavily on clear channels of diplomacy and well-defined national security structures, this kind of freelance foreign policy behavior is always worth paying attention to. So as more of these communications continue to come out, the picture of Epstein is becoming more complex. He was a predator and also a self-styled power broker who imagined himself playing a role in international diplomacy. And he undoubtedly saw people, influential contacts, as currency, bartering and trading for influence, leverage, and favors. All right, coming up next, Poland rushes security forces to the site of a suspected sabotage attack on a key rail line to Ukraine. And thousands of protesters in Mexico City clash with police as outrage over cartel violence and government inaction boils over. I'll be right back. Hey, Mike Baker here with a question for all the dudes out there. Now, have you ever felt awkward picking up a prescription for something personal, right? Maybe wishing the pharmacist would, lower their voice. Maybe wishing there was a more discreet option. Well, there's a better, more discreet way to fill that prescription that you may be thinking about. Meet Rougiette Ready. It's a next-gen ED treatment made right in the USA. It's the first to target both the brain and body, boosting arousal and blood flow in just 15 minutes, with effects lasting up to 36 hours. Get out of town, 36 hours. Rougiette Ready is fast-acting. It's a dissolvable tablet formulated with clinically proven medications for ED. Now, getting Rougiette is easy, and that's the best part, right? Answer a few questions online, get reviewed by a doctor within 24 to 48 hours, and receive discreet delivery. No insurance, no pharmacy lines, no embarrassment. Just fast, effective results that you can count on. Ready to give Rougiette a try? Well, maybe so. Get 15% off your first order by going to rougiette.com/PDB and using code PDB. Or simply click the link in the video description or scan the QR code to claim this offer.
Rougiette prescriptions are compounded medications, available only if prescribed after an online consultation with a licensed clinician. Compounded drugs can be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and have not been reviewed by the FDA for safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing. Individual results may vary. Full safety information is available at rougiette.com.
Welcome back to the PDB. We're tracking an important development out of Eastern Europe, where Polish authorities say a critical rail line used to move aid and supplies into Ukraine was deliberately sabotaged over the weekend. The incident didn't cause any injuries, but it did cause real alarm inside the Polish government, and it's now being treated as a national security matter rather than a simple infrastructure accident. Late Saturday night, a section of track on the Warsaw to Lublin rail corridor was destroyed by what officials describe as an explosive device. Now, this isn't a small rural spur line. It's one of the main arteries that's used to ship humanitarian aid and other supplies toward Ukraine's border. The damage was discovered early Sunday morning, and investigators quickly determined it wasn't just wear and tear or weather or mechanical failure. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk was blunt in his assessment. He called it, quote, an act of sabotage. And that wasn't the only concerning detail. A little further down the same corridor, near the town of Puławy, investigators found metal objects deliberately placed on the tracks. Those objects didn't cause a derailment, but officials say they were clearly positioned to do so. They also found damage to overhead power lines along the same route, which investigators believe are connected to the main incident. All of this taken together has prompted Poland to deploy security forces and territorial defense units along roughly 120 kilometers of track to conduct a full sweep, looking for additional devices or signs of tampering. Officials say they don't want to miss anything, and they aren't ruling out the possibility of more attempts. This rail line is one of the most important logistical pathways for Ukraine. Poland has been a central hub for everything from generators and medical supplies to ammunition moving east. Any disruption to those corridors creates delays. And in a war where timing matters, that can have real consequences. And for that reason, suspicion is already swirling around Russia. There's a surprise. Polish officials did not directly name Moscow, but they strongly hinted at foreign involvement. Prime Minister Tusk said there is, quote, a high probability that the sabotage was carried out by an intelligence service, not a lone actor or a criminal group. Other officials described it as, quote, unprecedented, coordinated, and clearly intended to disrupt assistance to Ukraine. Again, Poland stopped short of naming Russia outright, but given the timing, the target, and the pattern of similar incidents across Europe in recent years, it's not difficult to connect the dots. Western intelligence agencies have previously warned that Russia might expand its hybrid warfare toolkit to include sabotage of infrastructure inside NATO countries supporting Ukraine. Of course, this isn't the first incident that Poland has dealt with. As we reported just earlier this year, authorities arrested multiple individuals tied to a Russian intelligence network, accused of plotting attacks on rail and military infrastructure. So there's already a backdrop of activity that Polish officials have been monitoring closely. For now, the rail line has been repaired and reopened, but the investigation is ongoing. Poland's security services are reviewing surveillance footage, interviewing potential witnesses, and combing through communications intercepts to determine who was behind the attack and whether they had local accomplices. What happens next will be important, of course. If Poland attributes this to a foreign actor, especially an intelligence service, it raises a different set of questions for NATO. Sabotage inside a member state's borders, especially involving critical infrastructure tied to Ukraine's defense, moves the conversation from criminal investigation into the realm of alliance security. We'll keep watching as more details emerge and as Poland completes its sweep of the rail corridor. But for now, the headline is pretty straightforward. A key supply line to Ukraine was deliberately targeted. The Polish government is treating it as sabotage, and investigators are looking closely at the possibility of foreign intelligence involvement, with Russia at the top of the list of suspects. All right, switching focus to the south of the U.S. border. Mexico City witnessed one of its largest anti-government demonstrations in years this weekend as thousands of young people poured into the capital to protest cartel violence, official corruption, and what they describe as a government unable or unwilling to protect its citizens. The movement, driven largely by Gen Z activists, has been gaining momentum for weeks. But on Saturday, it crossed a new threshold when protesters breached police barricades surrounding Mexico's National Palace, forcing a confrontation that laid bare the country's deepening security crisis. As plumes of tear gas filled the streets, hooded protesters attacked riot police, dragging officers out of formation, beating some with hammers and chains, and indiscriminately throwing explosive devices and fireworks. That's according to a report from Fox News. The pandemonium left more than 120 people with injuries, 100 of whom were police officers. 60 were treated for minor injuries, while another 40 were hospitalized with contusions, cuts, concussions, and other injuries. Meanwhile, 20 protesters were arrested, while another 20 were referred for administrative offenses. So, what ignited this national anger? The demonstrations were organized in the wake of the November 1st assassination of Michoacan Mayor Carlos Manzo, a killing that many Mexicans now see as emblematic of a state that can neither control cartel violence or shield public officials from it. He was gunned down after publicly condemning Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum for failing to rein in the country's powerful criminal syndicates. According to NBC News, the country's youth quickly took up Manzo's mantle, accusing Sheinbaum of being too tolerant of organized crime. As our listeners may recall, Sheinbaum has repeatedly rejected offers of U.S. military assistance from the Trump administration, insisting that Mexico has the tools to confront the problem alone. But protesters say the country is losing the turf war with cartels and is now at a breaking point. One demonstrator lamented to reporters that, quote, the state is dying. All told, Saturday's demonstration in Mexico City drew some 17,000 protesters, and additional rallies were held in 5 other cities. Many of the participants told reporters they felt they had grown up in a Mexico where cartel control is routine and promises of reform rarely materialize. Their message was clear. They do not believe the state can protect them. And their concerns go beyond the recent assassination in Michoacan. It's about growing resentment over a judiciary widely seen as penetrated by cartel influence, local governments that govern in name only, and federal leaders who insist that progress is being made even as violence spreads across the country. Now, government officials and Sheinbaum himself, they still enjoys high approval ratings, have attempted to downplay the significance of Saturday's demonstration. They framed the protests as politically manipulated, claiming right-wing opposition groups sought to infiltrate the Gen Z movement and exploit the killing of Mayor Carlos Manzo to weaken President Sheinbaum. They further alleged the chaos in the capital was the work of a small band of organized, quote, provocateurs. But protesters rejected that explanation, arguing the confrontation reflected the sheer scale of anger in the community. The protesters also deny any partisan motive, and independent observers emphasize the decentralized nature of the movement. There are no identifiable leaders, no party ties, no formal organization, only shared frustration. Still, observers stress that this weekend's events do not signal an imminent collapse of the state. Mexico's federal institutions remain intact, and Sheinbaum still has a considerable governing mandate. But the protests exposed a system under considerable strain, and a government that is quickly losing the trust and patience of the next generation. Okay, coming up in the back of the brief, Spanish authorities arrest an Ecuadorian drug kingpin who faked his own death from COVID-19 and allegedly kept running his cartel from the shadows. I'll have those details when we come back. Hey, Mike Baker here with an important message from our friends at Stopbox. Now, if you own a handgun for protection, you know the dilemma, right? Lock it up safe or keep it accessible. Now, the key is to be able to do both, right? Safely accessible. And that's why I'm very happy to tell you about Stopbox Pro. It's a game changer for quick, secure access. There's no keys to fumble with, no batteries to fail, just a mechanical push-button system that opens in seconds with one hand. With Stopbox Pro, you can keep your protection close at hand, yet safely stowed for total peace of mind. Plus, it's built like a tank, all USA made. With holidays approaching, it's the perfect gift for anyone serious about safety, and we should all be serious about safety. TSA compliant for travel as well. And they also have vehicle safes and chamber locks. For a limited time only, our PDB listeners are getting a terrific deal. Not only do you get 10% off your entire order when you use code PDB10 at StopBoxUSA.com, but they're also giving you buy one, get one free for their Stopbox Pro. That's right, 10% off and a free Stopbox Pro when you use code PDB10 at StopBoxUSA.com. Hey, Mike Baker here. Now, you've probably asked yourself this question. You say to yourself, hey, do doctors have Black Friday sales? Okay, maybe you haven't asked that question, but it's a good one to ask, right? Well, the doctors at Brickhouse Nutrition, they do have sales. They just announced their Black Friday 30% off sale. It's the biggest sale of the year. The most impressive health and nutrition products in the industry are now 30% off. For example, Lean, that's right, Lean, Lean is on sale. It's the doctor-formulated weight loss supplement for people who want to lose meaningful weight without injections. And also, you can get 30% off creatine, right? Creatine designed just for women to help you look leaner, in shape, and toned without extra dieting or exercise. You can even get 30% off Field of Greens. This stuff is terrific. The only superfruit and vegetable drink shown in a university study to actually slow aging. And only Field of Greens promises better health results that your doctor will notice. Every Brickhouse product, from better sleep to superior collagen, is now 30% off. But hurry, because these Black Friday deals, well, they go fast. So visit BrickHouseSale.com and save 30%. That's BrickHouseSale.com. Again, one more time, BrickHouseSale.com. In today's Back of the Brief, a 4-year-long manhunt for an elusive drug trafficking kingpin has finally come to an end. Spanish and Ecuadorian authorities arrested Wilmer Chavarria over the weekend, one of Ecuador's most wanted drug traffickers, 4 years after he faked his own death and vanished into Europe. According to Spain's national police, Chavarria was detained in the Spanish city of Malaga on Sunday during a joint international operation after a years-long investigation that stretched across continents. Chavarria, the alleged leader of the Los Lobos criminal organization, was photographed being escorted by officers in a black and green tracksuit. How very Sopranos of him. The moment marked a quiet end to a fugitive run that began in 2021 when his family publicly claimed he had died of a heart attack brought on by COVID-19. Ecuadorian officials say the faked death was part of a calculated effort to assume a new identity, slip into Spain, and continue directing the gang's operations from afar. Ecuador's President Daniel Noboa said Chavarria used his time in Europe to help coordinate drug shipments, order assassinations inside Ecuador, and oversee criminal enterprises that extended well beyond narcotics, including illegal gold mining operations. U.S. officials have also linked him to some 400 deaths during his tenure leading Los Lobos. Following the arrest, Noboa hailed the tireless work of Ecuadorian and Spanish law enforcement, calling international cooperation, quote, a necessity in combating transnational crime networks. Noboa said, quote, some wrote him off as dead. We hunted him down in his very own hell. He added, quote, we have captured the highest value target. Today the mafias fall back. Today Ecuador wins. For some background, Los Lobos, Spanish for the Wolves, has roughly 8,000 members and was designated a terrorist organization by the U.S. State Department back in September of this year. The group operates drug trafficking routes that run through Ecuador's port cities and, as I mentioned, has been tied to political assassinations and illegal mining operations, among other activities. Authorities also accuse the gang of maintaining close ties with Mexico's Jalisco New Generation cartel. While the capture of Chavarria is undeniably a win for the Ecuadorian government, dismantling the networks that he ran will prove far more challenging. Los Lobos has long operated in a fragmented ecosystem of alliances and splinter groups, and the fact that Chavarria successfully commanded the organization from abroad highlights how resilient and globalized his network has become. Moreover, the arrest takes place against the backdrop of Ecuador's broader security crisis. Once a regional model of stability in South America, over the past several years, Ecuador has faced skyrocketing homicides, attacks on politicians and journalists, and escalating battles between domestic gangs and foreign cartels vying for control of coastal ports and trafficking corridors. And Noboa's plans to combat the violence were dealt a major setback over the weekend. On Sunday, Ecuadorians voted down a proposal that would have allowed foreign governments to operate military bases in the country. It's a measure that Noboa argued would strengthen cooperation with the U.S. and increase pressure on groups like Los Lobos. With the referendum defeated, Noboa's options for expanding international support have now significantly narrowed. And that, my friends, is the President's Daily Brief for Tuesday, the 18th of November. Now, if you have any questions or comments, and I do hope you do, please reach out to me at pdb@thefirsttv.com. And if you haven't already, please check out our YouTube channel at President's Daily Brief. It's considered one of the finest of the YouTube channels. At least that's how I consider it. I'm Mike Baker, and I'll be back later today with the PDB Afternoon Bulletin. Until then, stay informed, stay safe, stay cool.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and leave a comment, a really positive, nice, and kind comment. That would be appreciated. And if you're not already subscribed to our channel, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our daily updates.